In addition to having really powerful form capabilities, RackForms is also an incredible platform for creating surveys. In this video, I just want to take a look at some of the more common ways and methods that we can use to both manage and manipulate surveys. So the most common form of survey that we'll often create in RackForms is to create a form page, and then under Advanced, we'll add the survey module. And we're going to take a look at an alternative to this in just a couple minutes here. But if you want a really quick formatted survey response, this is definitely what we want. So basically when we add this item, we'll get a single question and response asked of our users. And of course we can then change this to be anything that we want. So for every item that we add in a list format right here, we'll get a corresponding additional question, and we do the same thing with responses. So for every response that we have, we'll add a new line item. And when I build this in the form then, it looks a little something like this. And of course, as you'd expect, we have loads of controls over the styling and spacing of elements, as well as the presentation. And of course, if we want to get more detailed, we can always use our own custom style sheets to control exactly how our survey responses and questions appear. Now, part of the power of RackForms is that not only can we type in questions like this, of course we can just copy and paste in items as well. So if I have multiple items that I want to ask, I can just copy and paste from a predefined list, something like this. And as mentioned before then, I can go ahead and I can change different properties of my survey, for example, by changing the survey width, and I could change the survey page width here as well. And then I get something that looks, again, appropriately for how I want it to. Now, we also have the ability to do cool things like add trigger statements. So in other words, if we're asking our users about this survey and management wants to know why somebody strongly disagrees with one of our questions right here, we can go in and we can structure our survey so that strongly disagree would be something that management might want to know about. And then we can simply say, we can go into our trigger field and we can say if our value is equal to one of those trigger values, will then pop up an additional dialog. And we can do something like, please explain. And when we do this in the form, we're going to say for every item that we click strongly disagree, we'll get a please explain field. And if we don't have that selected, we won't show that. And so it's really easy to create custom surveys here where if we have something that people are interested in, we can very easily add additional trigger logic. Now again, we're going to take a look at a slightly different way of building surveys in just a second, but I want to show you one other really powerful feature of how RackForms handles surveys. So in all the examples that we've seen so far, whether it's creating our trigger logic or adding questions and answers, we've been doing so under the guise of manually typing or just copying and pasting items. But RackForms, being database friendly, will also allow us to create surveys using a database query. And so basically, if I have a table, as I do right here, so questions, and I have some question items that I've created, I can literally just tell RackForms to generate the questions based on those items. So here now I'm basically saying, go into the database, populate those questions, and show them to my users. And this is really, really powerful, super powerful in fact, because not only does this work in this particular context, that is just generating questions within the editor, this also works if we have dynamic questions after the form is already built. That is, if I want to change my survey, I don't even need to go into RackForms to do that. I can literally just change my database table and all my questions will be updated in real time. It's an incredibly powerful feature to manage lots of survey questions across a huge disparity in servers, properties, etc. So really, really powerful. Now, all of that said, this is using the survey module. RackForms also fully supports just using radio or checkbox items to create surveys in what we call the manual format. So in this particular case, let's say instead of actually having this automatic formatting right here, I basically just want to go in and I want to ask a question of my radio items, and then I want to have a list of responses as I did before. So I'm going to go into my select item text-based list right here, and I'll do something like this. And so now for each one of these questions, I'm essentially getting the exact same format that I had right here, just in terms of overlay. So I have a question and I have multiple responses. And as you can see here, RackForms then allows us to create lots of different styling based on this. But the one thing that we're actually concerned with right here is that in this particular layout right here, RackForms is going to put each item on its own line item like this. However, we can also use something called survey mode for the layout of those items. And when I do this, we're now going to get essentially the exact same alignment that we have right here. And we could do things like items per column. We could set specific item widths for each item, so I can say very quickly how I want these survey items to appear. Now, it is important to note right here that because I'm using a select item text-based list, which can be dynamic, we're not actually seeing those items in the editor. I can always, if I want to, go in and I can add those options manually like this. So we have a lot of flexibility here, and then this is going to allow us to, if we want, see exactly how our items will look when I'm using the survey layout options. Now, one of the main reasons why we might want to do something like this is if we want to have really custom logic based on the questions and answers that we're asking. So in other words, in this particular instance right here, we're basically saying that for every one of our items, in this case strongly disagree, we're going to show an additional dialog box. But when we build surveys like this, we now have complete control over our conditional processing. So I can do things like this. I can say 0 for being very dissatisfied, maybe 1 for being neutral, and then 2 for being very happy. So we would have more text in here, but for now I'm just going to keep this simple. And what I basically want to say is if the user answers 0 for a particular field, I actually want to show an additional text area, right? So maybe I say, please explain. So in other words, the same general logic that we had before, but now we're going to control it using custom conditional logic. And doing so is really simple. So I want to make this guy invisible by default. So I'm just going to uncheck field initially visible. And then for this guy, I basically want to go down to conditional processing, and I want to say on click, if the value is equal to, in this case, 0, then I'm going to show and enable that particular field that's hidden. So now by doing that, the field is disabled at first, but if I click 0, I'm going to show the please explain field. And again, you'll notice it has really simple toggle logic there. So in other words, we've essentially done the same thing that we've done right here, but we've just used the manual controls right here to get really, really granular. Now this is nice because we can also then do things like if the value is equal to several values, or maybe I only want to show it if some other value has been previously selected. Again, RackForms is primarily a form-based building tool. That is, we're asking questions of the user, but that doesn't mean that we can't also create really powerful and flexible surveys. And we have two main ways of doing that. The first way that we saw is to automate all the stuff that we just saw using this method. I just want to copy and paste in some questions and some answers, and RackForms will very happily create a survey for us and even allow us to do things like have conditional logic and toggling logic on our specific questions and answers. However, because this is RackForms, is because we want to give you the maximum amount of flexibility, you also have really powerful controls if you want to create surveys manually. In other words, we have a fully automated way of creating survey logic that has really powerful features like, again, toggle logic and even populating questions using a database query. But we also have a fully manual solution where I can basically just create groups of radio or checkbox items. I can make them look like a survey by using the layout mode, survey mode, and then I can do all sorts of the powerful things that I expect a survey to do, like show and hide fields, conditional logic, etc. So this is a very quick overview of some of the survey capable in RackForms. Like so many other features, it's incredibly powerful, and we're always happy to show and talk more about these features. If you have any specific questions or comments, please let us know at info@rackforms.com, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. And thanks for watching.